He was born Jesse Louis Burns in 1941 to a 16-year-old mother who was not married to his father because he, Jesse's father, age 33, was already married and living next door in their segregated neighborhood of Greenville, South Carolina. Jesse Louis Jackson, who died today at the age of 84, did not receive his full name until age 14. That's when his stepfather, Charles Jackson, adopted him. Soon thereafter, Jesse was sent to live with his grandmother, a young black boy in the Jim Crow South, rejected by his father and not exactly cherished by his stepfather. That he, Jesse Louis Jackson, would grow up to be a significant figure in the civil rights movement and the first black man to wage not one, but two serious and vote-getting campaigns for the presidency is a story of hope kept alive. You've probably seen that clip today, the Keep Hope Alive clarion call at the end of Jackson's thunderous speech at the 1988 Democratic National Convention. Properly so, because it's worth remembering that Jackson branded hope before Barack Obama did. Jackson's political audacity predated Obama's as well. It was vastly more difficult for civil rights activist Jackson to seek the presidency in 1984 when he did it for the first time than it was for Illinois Senator Obama to do so in 2007. That is why Obama, in a statement, said today he stood on Jackson's shoulders. Jackson's were sturdy but imperfect shoulders. He aggravated some in the civil rights movement who saw him as a publicity hound, reckless with finances and personal choices. In the mid-'80s, he apologized for inadvertently sowing divisions between blacks and Jews. Jackson was also, we should note, among the first unapologetic populists of the modern era, saying at the Democratic Convention in 1984, his constituency was the, quote, desperate, the damned, the disinherited, the disrespected, and the despised. While the means, methods, and racial orientation certainly differed, it's not that great a distance between Jackson's rhetoric and President Trump's vow in 2016 and many times since to uplift America's forgotten men and women. Perhaps that's why Trump has paid tribute to Jackson more than once today. A little later on, Ed O'Keefe will help us understand that relationship. Jackson was a bridge between hard-fought victories for voting rights and public accommodations in the 1960s and the multiracial coalition foreshadowed by Jackson's use of rainbow as a metaphor for America that first elected, then re-elected Obama. Jackson spoke as a preacher, a moralist in the political arena.
If an issue is morally right, it will eventually be political. It may be political and never be right. Fannie Lou Hamer didn't have the most votes in Atlantic City, but her principles have outlasted every delegate who voted to lock her out. Rosa Parks did not have the most votes, but she was morally right. Dr. King didn't have the most votes about the Vietnam War, but he was morally right.
Fannie Lou Hamer led a protest for black Mississippians at the Democratic Convention in 1964. Rosa Parks led the Montgomery bus boycott. Dr. Martin Luther King led the movement Jackson, sometimes imperfectly, tried to inherit and advance. In that 1988 convention speech, Jackson described his quest and something he thought of as a kind of contagion of courage.
As for Jesse Jackson, I'm tired of sailing my little boat far inside the harbor bar. I want to go out where the big ships float, out on the deep where the great ones are. And should my frail craft prove too slight for waves that sweep those billows o'er, I'd rather go down in the stirring fight than drowse to death at the sheltered shore. We got to go out, my friends, where the big boats are.
Jackson got out to where the big boats are, and there he stayed. Georgia Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock, inspired by Jackson in many ways, will join us for a remembrance. But first, as I promised, Ed O'Keefe joins us now for more on the Trump-Jackson relationship. Ed?
Major, it was quite interesting to see the president go there this morning the way he did, because he's correct in that these two men had known each other for quite some time. There's a great anecdote in a new book, new in the sense it came out last fall, from our colleague Abby Phillip, recalling the campaigns of Jesse Jackson and the influence he's had on politics since the 80s, about when Jackson went to a Mike Tyson fight at the Taj Mahal, I think, or the Trump Plaza in Atlantic City, back during his '84 campaign. And who showed up at the pre-party but Donald Trump to give Jesse Jackson a tour of the facility? And they were mobbed by people who were eager to see mostly Jackson, who at the time was, a bit of a political anomaly. And as the president said, was a force of nature like few others before him. Trump knew that. Trump wanted to be a part of that, at least in 1984, when that campaign launched. And to your point, ultimately, they were, in essence, trying to reach the same exact people, poor, white, rural voters in this country who they both believed had been forgotten. How they got to them, how they appealed to them were quite different, of course, but ultimately they were trying to reach the same people and at different times. Perhaps most notably, it was in the late 1990s as Jackson focused much of his work on the Rainbow Push Coalition, on economic empowerment for blacks and other minority communities, that he worked with a collection of business leaders, especially in the New York area, on diversifying the ranks of corporate America, and specifically the financial industry based there in New York. If you've been to New York, if you've been down to the financial district, you know 40 Wall Street, which is that pistachio-hued older building amid the other skyscrapers, and it's owned by Donald Trump. And he gave Jackson office space in there to run the Rainbow Push Coalition's Wall Street project. And there's video of the two of them at events in the late 90s, essentially joshing each other for both being magnanimous, self-effacing, and able to fill a room. So, if you're someone who grew up in the 80s and 90s, as I did, or were earlier parts of your career, Major, not to date either of us, these were bold-faced names, right? These were two guys who were around, who dabbled in politics and business, and at different times had competing but also similar interests and goals, and really, in essence, are icons of that era, if not, ultimately successful, at least in the case of Jackson. So for the president to say, I knew him, I worked with him, I supported his work, is absolutely true. He used his statement, however, this morning to bat away those that call him racist and believe he has not been as kind to minorities in the years since. But it is accurate that they had a bit of a relationship. We don't know yet. We haven't heard what the plans are for Jackson's funeral, which is expected to be in Chicago at some point next week. But don't be surprised if the current and former presidents show up to pay tribute, because all of them living currently have had some kind of a relationship with him, most especially, of course, Barack Obama, but also Donald Trump and Bill Clinton certainly as well.
Ed O'Keefe at the White House for us. Thank you so very much.